I never imagined that one decision would shape my entire life. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, and staring at a future that seemed both daunting and exciting. I had a degree in marketing, but I felt like I was just another fish in a sea of graduates who were also trying to make their way in the corporate world. The whole climbing the corporate ladder thing didn't excite me. What I wanted was to build something of my own. I had a passion for photography, and that passion had been quietly simmering in the background of my life for years. It wasn't until a conversation with my best friend, Jake, that I realized something crucial. I didn't need to wait around for some big corporate job to get started. I could build a business around my passion right now. I remember the exact moment he said it. Dude, you don't need to work for someone else to make it. Start a photography business. You know how to use a camera better than most people I know. Just start. At the time, I thought he was crazy. I had zero business experience, no savings, and honestly, I wasn't even sure if people would pay for my photos. But something about the way he said it stuck with me. I didn't need a perfect plan. I didn't need to wait until I felt ready. I just needed to start. So I did. The first few months were brutal. I spent all my savings buying a decent camera, lenses, and lighting equipment. I'd watch hours of YouTube videos and read articles on business and marketing strategies late into the night. The idea of making a living from my camera felt like a distant dream, and my friends and family didn't make it any easier. Most of them thought it was a phase or that I was chasing an unrealistic goal. Photography doesn't pay the bills, they'd say. Get a real job. But I was determined. Every weekend, I would take on free jobs, shooting events, friends' weddings, family gatherings. Anything to build up a portfolio. I didn't have clients yet, but I had my passion, and that was all I needed. It didn't take long before I started to build a small following. I started posting my work on Instagram and Facebook. Slowly, I began to get a few inquiries. Nothing big, but enough to keep me motivated. After about 6 months of free work, things began to change. One of the brides I'd photographed recommended me to her friend, who was getting married. That job was the turning point. I shot the wedding for a decent fee and did a damn good job. I was starting to get paid for what I loved to do, and that was an incredible feeling. But I knew I had a long road ahead. At the time, I was living in a small apartment with minimal overhead. I didn't have a car, and I relied on public transportation to get to shoots. That was fine at first, but as my business grew, I quickly realized I needed to make some big moves to keep it going. I needed to become more professional, more organized, and I had to look the part. The first big investment I made was in branding. I spent hours working with a graphic designer to create a logo, business cards, and a website that would make my business look legitimate. This wasn't just about making it look nice. It was about setting the tone for how I wanted to be perceived. I wanted to attract serious clients who were willing to pay for quality, not just the cheapest option. I wanted to stand out in a crowded market. By the time I hit my 1-year mark, I was making a decent living. I had some regular clients, but I wasn't yet where I wanted to be. I wanted to scale. I knew that in order to grow, I had to step outside my comfort zone and start networking more. The idea of putting myself out there terrified me, but I also knew that no one was going to discover me sitting in my apartment. I attended photography events, joined online communities, and reached out to influencers and other photographers who I admired. Networking wasn't easy. Rejection was constant. I reached out to dozens of influencers and offered to shoot content for them, but I was often met with silence or politely worded, "No thank you" responses. But I kept pushing. I knew I couldn't quit just because things weren't happening as quickly as I'd hoped. Eventually, I landed my first big gig. A well-known local fashion brand needed a photographer for a product launch. It was a dream come true. The pressure was on, but I nailed it. The photos were featured on their website and social media, and that opened the floodgates. From there, I started landing more commercial work. I shot for clothing lines, restaurants, and even big brands I'd only ever seen on billboards. One of the most important lessons I learned early on was how to manage my time and finances. When you're an entrepreneur, you're wearing multiple hats. You're not just the creative mind. You're also the marketer, the accountant, the manager, and the customer service rep. In the beginning, I was doing everything myself. I didn't hire anyone or even outsource any work. It was exhausting, but I knew it was necessary. As the business grew, I realized that I had to start delegating tasks. I hired a part-time assistant to help with scheduling, a social media manager to handle my online presence, and an accountant to handle the books. It was a big step, but it allowed me to focus on what I did best, taking photos and working with clients. 5 years into my business, I had a full-time team, a studio, and a brand that was recognized in my city. I had gone from being a 23-year-old with no business experience and a dream to being a successful entrepreneur with a growing company. But the journey wasn't without its struggles. There were countless late nights, moments of self-doubt, and days when I thought about throwing in the towel. But each time I pushed through, something amazing happened. I learned, I grew, and I built something I was incredibly proud of. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. That decision to take a risk and follow my passion changed everything. It wasn't always easy, and there were plenty of times when I questioned myself. But in the end, all those tough moments were worth it. I can't imagine doing anything else. I'm living proof that if you're willing to put in the work, take risks, and not listen to the naysayers, you can turn a passion into a thriving business. The most important thing I've learned is this: success doesn't happen overnight. It takes hard work, dedication, and a willingness to fail. But if you stay focused and keep pushing, you'll eventually get there. And when you do, it will feel so much sweeter knowing that you built it from the ground up. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I accidentally became the owner of a $3 million business after a drunken bet with my roommate. This is going to sound made up, and maybe I'd think the same if someone else told me. But every word is true, even the most ridiculous parts. 2 years ago, I was broke, sleeping on a ripped couch in a 2-bedroom apartment in Cincinnati with a college buddy named Wes. Wes was the kind of guy who would sell you a product he hadn't made yet, just to prove he could. I was the opposite. I majored in literature, worked as a barista, and my biggest financial goal was affording decent coffee that didn't come in a bulk tub. The night it started, we were 6 beers deep, halfway through a game of Mario Kart. I was losing miserably. Wes, half-joking, said, "You couldn't sell a glass of water in a desert." I told him, I could sell ice to a polar bear if I wanted to. I just don't want to. He dared me to prove it. By the next morning, I was hungover and had completely forgotten about the bet until Wes came into the kitchen holding his laptop. He bought a domain, bearice.com. He'd spent $89 on it and said, "You've got 3 months. Prove you can sell anything. If you make a profit, I'll match it and we'll split whatever it becomes. If not, you owe me double." I didn't take it seriously until he put a countdown timer on the site and posted a screenshot of the bet on Reddit. People started watching, mocking, encouraging. It went viral way faster than I was ready for. So I got to work. I had no product, no idea, and no experience. But I had one thing: pressure. I decided to lean into the absurdity. If I had to sell ice to a polar bear, maybe that's what I should literally try to do. I designed a tongue-in-cheek website selling custom artisanal ice cubes with weird shapes, dinosaurs, skulls, cubes with edible flowers frozen inside. I branded them as luxury ice for cocktails, and the first product I listed was a $19.99 10-pack of bear cubes. I used pictures from free stock image sites, mocked up some Photoshop packaging, and put a buy now button that redirected to a waitlist. It was fake at that point, but the joke caught on. Twitter found it. TikTok got wind. Someone made a skit pretending to be a luxury ice influencer. Within 10 days, we had 4,000 people on the waitlist. Wes, to his credit, didn't gloat. He said, "Well, I guess we're doing this." We used his credit card to order silicone molds from Alibaba and started freezing water in our kitchen. Literally. Our freezer was full of these weird little cubes. We hand-packed 100 trial orders and mailed them in coolers with dry ice. We sold out in 48 hours. The next week, a bartender from LA with 300K Instagram followers posted a video of himself using the bear cubes in a cocktail and called them extra as hell, but beautiful. That video alone got us 12,000 new waitlist signups. Now we had a real problem. We couldn't keep up. I called in favors from every friend I knew. We rented a local commercial kitchen and bought 3 industrial freezers. I was managing orders on Shopify, replying to DMs, dealing with USPS claims when shipments melted. Every hour was chaos. But we were making money. 3 months after the bet, we had grossed $48,000. Wes said, I owe you a partnership. We split everything 50/50ths, just like you promised. But that's where the story really begins. As demand grew, we stopped freezing the ice ourselves and found a small manufacturer in Colorado who specialized in purified ice for whiskey bars. We pitched them our molds, negotiated a deal, and scaled production. In parallel, we expanded to themed collections, spooky sips for Halloween, skulls, bats, love on the rocks for Valentine's Day, hearts, roses, and eventually, branded corporate cubes for luxury hotels and events. We hired 2 friends part-time to handle customer service and fulfillment. 6 months in, we hit $200,000 in sales. That's when the VC emails started. I won't lie, I almost deleted the first one. I thought it was spam. But a small investment group from New York had seen our feature in a lifestyle blog and wanted to talk. I didn't even know how to pitch. We just got on Zoom, told our story, showed them the TikToks, the press, the margins. They offered $300,000 for 10% of the business. We took it. That money let us move out of the kitchen and into a real production space. We rebranded to Glacier and Gold and hired a real designer. Our packaging got sleeker. We introduced a subscription box for home cocktail enthusiasts. Revenue doubled, then tripled. In year 2, we hit $1.6 million in sales. Wes quit his sales job. I hired a COO who actually knew what she was doing. And then came the wildest turn. We landed a deal with a national chain of upscale liquor stores to carry Glacier and Gold ice molds and cocktail kits in 200 locations. That deal pushed us past $3 million in revenue last quarter. Now I sit here, writing this from a stupidly expensive co-working loft we don't really need, staring at a fridge full of custom cubes, wondering how any of this happened. Here's the truth. I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I didn't plan it. I didn't have a vision board or a 5-year plan. I took a dumb bet seriously, kept showing up every day, and leaned into what was already working. Sometimes, that's enough. Wes still jokes that this all started because I couldn't handle losing at Mario Kart. He might be right. But if you ask me what I actually learned, it's this. Everything is sellable if you tell a good enough story. Even ice. Especially ice. I was 26, broke, and just got fired from my 3rd job in 14 months. My resume looked like someone had tried a bunch of careers on for size and hated all of them. I'd sold insurance, poorly, done entry-level data entry, soul-crushing, and even tried managing a pizza place, disaster. I was living in a shared apartment with 2 guys who regularly borrowed my milk and somehow never paid rent on time. My girlfriend had just moved across the country for grad school. I was stuck. Then came the couch. Yeah, that's how it started. One night, I'm walking home and I see this beaten-up but weirdly beautiful vintage couch sitting on the curb. I stopped, just staring at it. I don't know why, but I took a photo and posted it on Instagram with a dumb caption like, trash or treasure? A friend DMs me and says, dude, if you can snag that, I'll give you $100. So I did. I dragged that damn thing 2 blocks, nearly threw out my back, and somehow got it into the apartment. I spent the whole weekend cleaning it, researching the fabric, replacing 2 busted legs. I posted it on Facebook Marketplace. Sold at $4/$275. 3 things happened after that. 1. I paid my portion of rent for once. 2. I bought a cheap carpet cleaner off Craigslist. 3. I realized I might have stumbled onto something. For the next few weeks, I became a trash collector turned furniture flipper. I'd roam neighborhoods in the early morning or late at night, hunting for discarded pieces. I stuck to couches at first. They had the highest profit margins if you could clean and fix them. I learned how to restitch torn seams, sand and stain wood, and remove just about any stain you can imagine. My hands always smelled like vinegar and Febreze. But I was making money. Within 3 months, I'd saved up $3,000, more than I'd ever had in my account at once. I quit looking for jobs. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't broke. I registered a small business name, Urban Revival. Then came the competition. One morning I go to pick up a listing, a green mid-century love seat someone was practically giving away, and someone else is already loading it into their van. I recognized the guy. He'd been commenting on some of my marketplace posts. Turns out, others had started flipping furniture too, and I was no longer the only scavenger in town. Sales slowed. Listings dried up. My profit margin dipped. I realized I couldn't scale this model. There were only so many good couches out there. But I had a wait list of customers messaging me asking for custom pieces. Do you have a leather couch in brown with clean lines? Do you ever get mid-century modern stuff? I want something comfy but retro. That's when I had a crazy thought. What if I made the couches? I had no idea how to build furniture, but I knew what people wanted. I'd been immersed in their DMs and their comments for 6 months. I started small, took a basic woodworking class at the community center. Then I partnered with a retired carpenter who I found through a Craigslist ad. He had the tools. I had the vision. We made a prototype. Simple, boxy, wood frame, tufted cushions. Took us 3 weeks. I posted it on Instagram with the caption, "Not flipped. Built." It sold in 6 hours. $650. We built 2 more. Then 5. Then 10. We rented a shared space in a warehouse with 2 other makers, a potter and a metalworker. I started designing frames in SketchUp. I took upholstery courses at night and YouTubed everything else. The carpenter, Jim, became like a second dad to me. He worked slowly, methodically, always with music playing and coffee in hand. I learned more from him in 8 months than in any job I ever had. Fast forward 18 months. I hired 2 young guys from the local trade school to help with production. I brought in a friend from college to handle social media and marketing. We launched a Shopify store. Urban Revival. Custom couches made from scratch. We offered 8 styles, dozens of fabrics, free delivery within 100 miles. We were scrappy. Every photo shoot was done with borrowed props in my apartment. We used customer photos in our catalog. I bartered free couches to influencers in exchange for promotion. We got featured on a local blog, then a bigger design site, and suddenly, orders were coming in faster than we could build. Revenue hit $250K in our second year, then $520K in the third. We had a wait list of 3 months. I had to stop taking DMs from strangers begging me to just build one for their apartment. Then came the deal. A boutique furniture company from Austin reached out. They wanted to acquire us, or at least partner. At first I said no. I didn't want to give up control, but their offer included manufacturing resources, mentorship, and something I never thought I'd want, a salary. After negotiating, we structured a deal. They got 60% ownership. I retained 40% and full creative control. We rebranded to Revival Works and launched nationally. Within a year, our pieces were in 3 design catalogs and sold through 2 major retailers. We did $2.2 million in sales last year. I still remember dragging that first couch down the street, sweating through my shirt, wondering if I was insane. Now I run a 15-person team, design custom furniture full-time, and consult for other makers trying to break into the space. I'm not some genius. I just saw something others ignored, and I didn't let the fact that I didn't know how stop me from trying. Sometimes trash really is treasure. I never planned on becoming an entrepreneur. In fact, the idea scared me. I was the guy who liked certainty, a steady paycheck, and a defined career path. I was a mechanical engineer for nearly 10 years, working for a mid-sized aerospace firm in the Midwest. I had a nice cubicle, a predictable 9 to 5, a decent 401k, and a boss who didn't hate me. And then, as it often goes in stories like these, everything changed in the span of 1 week. It started with a lunch meeting. A former college roommate, Nate, was in town, and we grabbed burgers like old times. Over beer and fries, he told me how he'd left his corporate job in Austin and started a small manufacturing business focused on modular bike racks. Nothing fancy, just something he could control. He made less money, worked more hours, and yet somehow looked 10 years younger than I felt. His exact words were, "Dude, I sleep like a baby. I don't have to ask anyone for permission anymore." That conversation stuck with me. I didn't sleep for 3 days, not because I was excited, but because I was horrified. What if I was wasting my life chasing a version of success that didn't fit me? I brushed it off as a phase. Then the layoff happened. The aerospace firm had lost a government contract and 70 of us were cut in one go. I remember sitting in the HR office, clutching my severance package like a life vest, not sure whether I was sinking or about to swim for the first time. I spent 2 months applying for jobs and hearing nothing. I had some savings, no kids, and a mortgage that wasn't terrible. One night, out of frustration, I opened up an old design I'd been tinkering with for years, a modular, customizable storage system that could fit into any garage. Think adult Legos, but for tools, bikes, and lawn equipment. I had built the prototype in my basement out of boredom years ago, and my neighbors had always said I should patent it. I didn't. But that night, I thought, what if? I posted a crude video of the system on Reddit. Just a demo. No website, no brand, no pricing. It blew up. Within 48 hours, I had 2,000 people asking how much it cost. A guy from Portland offered to PayPal me $500 just to send him the prototype. I declined. I had no supply chain, no manufacturing partner, and no clue what I was doing. But I was hooked. I spent the next 6 months learning the ins and outs of starting a product-based business. I watched YouTube videos, listened to podcasts at 2x speed, and cold emailed anyone who had ever mentioned manufacturing on LinkedIn. I finally partnered with a small shop in Indiana that could produce 50 units a month. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I named the company SnapGrid. I designed a minimalist website using a template and set up pre-orders. I priced the starter kit at $199. My first batch of 50 units sold out in 17 minutes. That's when the problems began. The second batch arrived late. The third had a defect in one of the aluminum joints that made the structure wobbly. I had to issue refunds. I was doing customer support myself and accidentally replied to a guy named Jeff, calling him Jennifer. He left a nasty review. I cried in my car for 20 minutes after that. I kept going. I learned about better quality control, hired a part-time VA in the Philippines to help with emails, and streamlined the design to reduce assembly time. I launched a Kickstarter for a new version of SnapGrid with add-ons and customization options. The goal was $20,000. We hit $86,000 in 11 days. I hired Nate as a consultant. He brought in a new manufacturer that could handle bigger volumes. We rented a 1,200 square feet warehouse space just outside of town. I moved my entire operation there and started fulfilling orders myself. I worked 80-hour weeks, ruined 2 pairs of jeans, and got carpal tunnel from printing shipping labels. By year 2, we had crossed $1.2 million in gross sales. I paid off my mortgage. I hired 3 employees. I got a feature in a popular DIY YouTube channel, and suddenly we were shipping internationally. Australia became our second largest market overnight. Who knew Aussies had so much stuff to organize? Then came the lawsuit. A big box competitor claimed we infringed on a patent they had filed years ago. I had never heard of them. Their product was plastic garbage compared to ours, but they had lawyers. I spent $40,000 in legal fees fighting it. We settled for less than half that, but it drained me. I thought about quitting for the first time. Instead, I doubled down. I redesigned SnapGrid from the ground up, launched version 2.0 with a sleeker look, built-in lighting options, and even a smartphone app that could map your garage layout and suggest configurations. We sold 5,000 units in 3 months. Now, for years in, SnapGrid is a $6.8 million business. We employ 14 people full-time. I'm not rich, not yet, but I own my time. I take Fridays off. I answer customer emails personally once a week because I want to stay close to the community. We're planning to launch a new vertical, Snap Closet, for wardrobe systems next year. Looking back, that layoff was the best thing that ever happened to me. Not because it made me an entrepreneur, but because it forced me to stop being afraid. I didn't have a master plan. I had an idea, a Reddit post, and a willingness to keep moving when things went sideways. So if you're sitting in your cubicle reading this and wondering if you should take the leap, don't quit tomorrow. But don't stay frozen either. Build something. Share it. Watch what happens. The worst case scenario is you go back to a job. The best case? You change your life. I did. And it all started with a bad burger and a better question. I never planned to become an entrepreneur. It was the kind of thing I associated with either ultra-ambitious Ivy League types or the scrappy hustlers who sold candy bars in middle school. I was neither. I was 28, burned out from my second job in 3 years, and sitting in my crappy apartment in Cleveland when I had my first serious thought about quitting the corporate grind and doing something for myself. The trigger wasn't dramatic. It was my manager asking me to circle back on a deck I'd stayed up until 2 a.m. making. I hadn't eaten dinner. I stared at his Slack message for a full minute and then stood up, walked to the kitchen, and stared out the window for 20 more. Something inside me just broke. I didn't quit on the spot. I'm not that impulsive. But it was the moment I started mentally writing my resignation letter. The idea for my business started as a joke, honestly. I was ranting to my friend Sam over beers about how I couldn't find decent, affordable, non-boring furniture for my apartment. Everything was either flimsy particle board or absurdly overpriced. I said something like, someone needs to make furniture for normal people who don't want it to fall apart, but also don't want to spend $900 on a nightstand. Sam laughed and said, so do it. I'm not a designer. I can barely draw a straight line. But I know people, and I know how to make things happen. That's always been my actual skill, getting people on board. I found a local woodworker named Jamie through Instagram. He'd been doing custom work in his garage and had a solid following. I cold met him with a half-baked idea. What if we designed a few simple, sturdy furniture pieces and sold them online under a brand that didn't pretend to be high-end, but wasn't total crap either? He agreed to meet. That first meeting, we were both skeptical. Jamie didn't trust me not to flake, and I wasn't sure he'd be willing to scale beyond one-off custom orders. But we had coffee, and something clicked. We started small. He built a prototype coffee table over a weekend based on a rough sketch and a lot of guesswork. I took some pictures of it in my living room, threw together a basic Shopify site, and wrote a bunch of sarcastic, self-aware product descriptions. Think, this table won't change your life, but it'll hold your stuff and probably survive 3 moves. We sold 12 tables in the first week. All local. All through people we knew. That was enough to make me quit my job. I drained most of my savings, about $9,000, to rent a small workshop space for Jamie, buy materials in bulk, and pay a local photographer to take professional product shots. I did everything else myself: social media, customer service, website, copywriting, packaging. It was chaos. Orders doubled every month for the first 4 months. We hired a second carpenter, then a third. I stopped sleeping more than 5 hours a night. My girlfriend left me. I didn't blame her. I was completely consumed. At month 7, we hit a wall. We couldn't fulfill orders fast enough. Customers were waiting 6 weeks. A few of them got vocal on Twitter. I panicked. I tried hiring more help, but training took time, and quality started slipping. A batch of 40 tables had uneven legs. One customer posted a TikTok of her trying to balance a wine glass on the wobbly surface. It went viral, in a bad way. Sales plummeted. I felt like I was drowning. I'd taken out a $25,000 small business loan 2 months earlier to try and scale, and now I was staring down a disaster. Jamie was burned out. He wanted to go back to custom work. I couldn't blame him. I started looking at job listings again. I figured maybe I'd learned something useful, and I'd just move on. Then I got an email. It was from a guy named Ryan who ran a fulfillment and manufacturing operation 2 hours away. He'd seen our stuff on TikTok. Yes, even the bad video, and thought it was salvageable. He offered to meet. Ryan was all business. He didn't care about our branding or our vibe, but he did care about our numbers, which, surprisingly, weren't terrible. He offered a deal. He'd handle production for a flat rate per piece if I gave him 6 months of exclusivity and moved fulfillment to his operation. I took the gamble. We shut down new orders for 3 weeks while transitioning production. I spent the time reworking the website, cleaning up our marketing, and writing a brutally honest apology letter to our customer base. I posted it on our homepage, pinned it on all social media, and emailed every single subscriber. I said, we screwed up. We grew too fast, and we didn't deliver what we promised. But we're fixing it. People respected that. Not everyone, but enough. By month 10, we were back on track. Our refund rate dropped to under 2%. We were delivering within 10 days. The wine glass lady even made a follow-up video praising the new table she received. That one went viral, too, in a good way. Fast forward to now, it's been 3 years. The company, called Barebones, is doing $1.8 million in annual revenue. We have 5 full-time employees. Jamie came back, but this time as a design consultant, not a builder. Ryan's team handles manufacturing, and I've since brought in a COO to help me not burn out again. We're not a unicorn. We don't have VCs or flashy office spaces, but we have a loyal customer base, solid margins, and a product people actually like. And more importantly, I don't dread Mondays anymore. I work harder than I ever did at any job, but it's a different kind of hard. It's mine. People ask me sometimes if I regret quitting that corporate job. And honestly, sometimes I do, like when I'm dealing with freight issues or a cranky customer who expects instant delivery. But most days, I look around at the chaos I built and think, yeah, this beats circling back on a PowerPoint any day. In 2019, I made the dumbest decision of my life that somehow turned out to be the smartest. I was 26, working a job I hated at a mid-size insurance company in a suburb outside of Chicago. My job was about as exciting as watching a spreadsheet try to load itself. I wasn't miserable, but I felt wasted. Like every ounce of energy I poured into my day went into keeping a machine running that didn't care if I existed. So one day, during an all-hands Zoom call where our CEO talked about revolutionizing cross-functional synergy, I did what most rational people would do. I quit. No plan. No side hustle. Just a feeling in my chest that said, this can't be it. My girlfriend at the time thought I was going through a quarter-life crisis. Maybe I was. But I gave myself 6 months of runway and told myself I'd figure something out. I drove Uber, sold stuff on eBay, and freelanced as a PowerPoint designer just to pay rent. The idea came in a Trader Joe's parking lot. I had just finished delivering an Uber Eats order and was sitting in my car, scarfing down a microwaved burrito. A guy parked next to me, got out, and opened his trunk to unload what looked like 50 canvas tote bags with custom logos on them. I asked him what he did. He said he ran a small DTC skincare company and gave these away to influencers and microbloggers. He mentioned how annoying it was to get stuff like that printed in bulk with good quality. He said most companies either had terrible customer service or high minimum orders that didn't make sense for small businesses. Cue light bulb. What if I made a print-on-demand promotional product service? Something specifically for startups and small businesses. Fast turnaround, no big minimums, with premium product choices. Totes, mugs, shirts, you name it. I didn't know the first thing about manufacturing or fulfillment. But I knew how to design, and I knew how to cold email. So I built a super janky website in 48 hours using Squarespace. I called it SwiftSwag. I took photos of blank tote bags, mocked up designs using Photoshop, and wrote blog posts like why founders should never order 10,000 pins again. I emailed 150 small businesses I found on Product Hunt and Indie Hackers. I offered free design mock-ups and no minimum orders. Out of 150, 3 replied. 1 placed a real order. That first order was 25 mugs with a minimalist avocado on them for a keto nutrition coach in Portland. I manually uploaded her design to Printful, handled customer service like I was Amazon, and shipped them with a handwritten note. She emailed me, "You're better than every vendor I've ever worked with." I almost cried. I was barely breaking even, but that feeling was like jet fuel. I reinvested every dollar back into better product samples and a custom Shopify store. I learned everything I could about sourcing, white labeling, and fulfillment. I reached out to independent creators and offered branded product bundles with no upfront cost. They promoted me to their followers. I didn't sleep much that year. By the end of 2020, I had over 400 customers. Most were solopreneurs, Etsy shop owners, or small brands. The average order value was $85. Profit margins were razor thin, but volume was growing fast. I kept things lean. I operated out of my 1-bedroom apartment. My dining table became my fulfillment center. My girlfriend, who by now had become my biggest cheerleader, after some initial eye rolls, helped me stuff boxes after work. Then in early 2021, a TikTok fitness influencer with 800K followers placed a $2,500 order for branded water bottles. She made an unboxing video that hit 1.2 million views. My site crashed for 2 hours. In the next 30 days, I made more money than I had made in the last 12 months combined. From there, everything became very real. I brought on a part-time operations manager and leased a 600-square-foot warehouse space. I switched to a better fulfillment partner and negotiated lower costs on bulk orders. I introduced tiered pricing and bundles. By 2022, SwiftSwag crossed $1.1 million in revenue. I had 3 full-time employees, a small army of freelancers, and a supplier network across 3 states. We introduced eco-friendly packaging and even custom holiday drops. And yet, I still didn't feel like a real entrepreneur. I didn't have investors. I didn't raise money. I wasn't on TechCrunch. But I had hundreds of happy customers and a business that paid me more than my old job ever did. Then the IRS came knocking. Turns out, I had seriously underestimated my quarterly tax payments. I owed close to $68,000 in taxes, penalties, and late fees. My accountant nearly choked. I had 2 choices, shut down the business and walk away with what I had, or take out a loan and double down. I chose the latter. I took a high-interest loan from a niche small business lender, don't recommend, but desperate times. I cleaned up my books, hired a legit CPA, and turned the whole business from scrappy to scalable. That moment forced me to grow up as a founder. I created SOPs, documented workflows, and built a customer dashboard that reduced customer support emails by 60%. We ended 2023 with $2.3 million in revenue and healthy profit margins. I paid off the loan 6 months early. SwiftSwag is now a 7-person operation. We've served over 9,000 businesses. I speak at founder meetups. I help other early-stage bootstrappers avoid the mistakes I made. Sometimes I think back to that Trader Joe's parking lot. If that guy had parked a row over, I might still be formatting Excel reports in a gray cubicle. Entrepreneurship is a strange beast. It asks you to bet on yourself even when everything logical says not to. But sometimes the dumbest decision of your life is the one that finally wakes you up. I never planned on becoming an entrepreneur. Honestly, if you'd asked me 5 years ago where I'd be now, I would have told you middle management, decent benefits, maybe a new car. I was comfortable being comfortable. But life doesn't care about your plans. The whole thing started with a sandwich. Not just any sandwich, my boss's lunch, to be precise. I worked as a project coordinator at a mid-sized logistics firm. One Tuesday, after a brutal meeting, he left his lunch in the break room fridge. I'd skipped breakfast, and when I opened that fridge, the smell hit me like a freight train. Roast beef, horseradish aioli, caramelized onions, ciabatta bread. I don't know what came over me, but I took it. I ate his damn sandwich. Of course, he found out. He wasn't angry, just disappointed. And that somehow felt worse. I tried to make it up to him by offering to buy him lunch the next day, but he declined. Then I had an idea. I told him I'd make him a sandwich. He smirked and said, "Go ahead." So I did. I woke up at 5 a.m., went to the local bakery, bought fresh ciabatta, cooked roast beef just the way my mom used to, and made the same sandwich I'd eaten, but better. I even wrapped it in wax paper and wrote his name on it with a Sharpie. The next day, he took a bite, looked at me, and said, "You made this?" Word spread around the office faster than budget cuts. By the end of the week, I was making sandwiches for 5 coworkers. They paid me $5 each, cash. At first, I just thought it was a fun way to earn a little extra. But then I realized I was making $125 a week with minimal effort. It wasn't big money, but it sparked something in me. I started experimenting with ingredients. Chipotle mayo, smoked turkey, sun-dried tomato pesto. People loved it. I was bringing in insulated bags like a lunch lady, taking pre-orders through Google Forms. I set up a little website on Squarespace called Savage Sandwiches and offered a weekly rotating menu. Still working full-time, still making sandwiches in my tiny apartment kitchen. Then came the office fire drill. Everyone had to evacuate. We were outside for 2 hours. No food trucks. No nearby delis. I had my cooler bag with me, so I started selling sandwiches on the curb like some rogue food vendor. I sold out in 12 minutes. A woman from a neighboring building came over and asked if I could bring sandwiches to their office next week. I said sure. By the end of that month, I was delivering to 5 offices. I was making more from sandwiches than my actual job. I didn't quit right away. I'm not reckless. I waited until my website crashed from traffic one Friday at noon and my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with Venmo notifications. I looked at my boss, yes, the one whose sandwich started all this, and told him I was giving my 2 weeks' notice. He just smiled. I figured, save me one of those roast beefs, yeah? The real chaos began after I went full-time. I rented a shared commercial kitchen from 4 a.m. to 9 a.m., Monday to Friday. Hired my cousin to help prep. Bought a beat-up Dodge Caravan on Craigslist and turned it into my sandwich delivery mobile. I rebranded as Savage Sammy's and got a logo designed by a college student for $75. Our biggest break came when someone from a local radio station got one of our turkey avocado bacon sandwiches during an office drop. He shouted us out live on air. Orders quadrupled that week. We had to hire 3 more people just to handle the load. Things got real fast. We needed permits, insurance, accounting help. I had no clue what I was doing. I maxed out 2 credit cards and took a loan from my grandmother. I was scared all the time. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered that first sandwich. That moment when I realized I could create something people actually wanted. A year later, I opened my first brick-and-mortar location. Small, maybe 700 square feet, but it was mine. We had a chalkboard menu, mismatched stools, and sandwiches named after people who helped me in the early days. The Mitch was the original roast beef, obviously. COVID nearly wrecked us. Sales dropped 80% overnight. I pivoted hard into delivery and created DIY sandwich kits people could make at home. I ran online sandwich making classes on Zoom, partnered with local breweries for sandwich and beer bundles. It was exhausting, but we made it through. Now we've got 3 locations, a food truck, and just signed a deal to be in 12 local convenience stores. We're not some national chain, and I'm okay with that. I still wake up at 5 a.m. sometimes just to feel that early grind again. And every now and then, I make that original sandwich for a customer who has no idea they're eating the bite that changed my entire life. I keep a sticky note on my fridge at home. It says, "Don't steal sandwiches, make better ones." Kind of a joke, kind of a creed. Funny how your lowest moment can turn into your best one. All it takes is a bite. When I was 26, I was flat broke, recently dumped, and living in my sister's basement outside of Minneapolis. My parents, who ran a modest hardware store in rural Iowa, had always hoped I'd take over the family business. But I was a creative type, and after college, I moved to LA to chase dreams of screenwriting. That fantasy crashed and burned over 6 years of half jobs, Craigslist roommates, and humiliating freelance gigs writing ad copy for low-budget YouTube prank channels. In January 2019, I came back to the Midwest with my tail between my legs. I figured I'd spend a few months regrouping and saving before figuring out my next move. I spent my days driving DoorDash and helping out at a local print shop part-time. Nights were spent doom-scrolling Reddit, downing Aldi wine, and pretending my life hadn't become a crater. It all started with a printer jam. One afternoon, the owner of the shop, Dave, was in the back cursing over a jammed Epson that had chewed through $80 worth of linen paper. I offered to help. I learned a thing or two about printer guts during college working in the library print lab. 10 minutes and a paperclip later, the beast was humming again. Dave slapped me on the back and grunted, "You missed your calling, kid." That night, I Googled common printer problems and fell into a weirdly deep rabbit hole. I found forums, subreddits, YouTube channels, and entire businesses dedicated to repairing and maintaining high-end home and office printers. It was like discovering an underground world. These weren't the cheap plastic inkjets you buy for your kid's science project. These were commercial grade, the kind used in law offices, architecture firms, hospitals. And they broke. A lot. I started posting on r/printers and even made a throwaway blog reviewing different models and chronicling the repairs I'd help with at the shop. People started messaging me for advice. Some even offered to pay me if I could walk them through fixes over Zoom. I charged $25 for the first one. The guy couldn't believe I fixed his issue in 15 minutes. An idea began to take shape. What if I offered a remote printer support service? No one wants to call the manufacturer and sit on hold for 90 minutes. And a lot of small businesses can't afford on-site tech help. I built a one-page website using Card, called it PrintPal, and offered simple remote diagnostics and repair for $39 per session. I posted about it on relevant subreddits and Facebook groups. In the first month, I made $217. The second, $890. By month 4, I'd crossed $2,000. I was stunned. I incorporated an LLC, added a Stripe checkout, and reinvested every penny into advertising on niche newsletters and running retargeting ads. I was still taking delivery gigs during the day, but my nights were fully booked with 30-minute Zoom calls troubleshooting misfeeds, streaking, connectivity issues. I started getting repeat clients, real estate offices, boutique publishers, even a tattoo parlor in Denver that printed custom stencils and had a cursed HP that only worked when the moon was full. The demand was there. I needed help. I brought on my cousin Josh, who was laid off from Geek Squad. I trained him for a week, and we split sessions 50/50ths. We added booking software and started offering subscription plans, $99/month for unlimited calls. That's when things exploded. By early 2021, we had 40-plus monthly subscribers and were clearing over $12,000/month. I quit my day jobs. We built a tiny CRM system using Airtable and Zapier to keep track of clients, issues, follow-ups. I paid a Fiverr designer $200 to overhaul the site and make us look legit. We started calling ourselves the Printer Guys. The funny thing? We didn't touch a single printer in person. Everything was remote. We knew the settings, the software, the hacks. People were amazed when we fixed things that the manufacturer couldn't. It felt good, empowering even. Then in summer 2021, a bigger client reached out. A local chain of medical clinics had over 100 printers across 20 locations and wanted centralized support. I nearly choked. We weren't ready, but I said yes. I spent 3 weeks building custom dashboards in Notion and hiring 2 more techs. We onboarded the client in phases. It worked. In 3 months, they cut their printer downtime by 70%. They renewed the contract and referred us to another healthcare provider. Suddenly, we weren't just PrintPal. We were a managed print services (MPS) provider. By 2022, we had 7 part-time techs, over 150 subscription clients, and a few large contracts. We rebranded again, this time to TonerBridge. We launched a custom portal, offered printer leasing partnerships, and built an affiliate program. I still lived in my sister's basement, but I was running a 6-figure business. It was surreal. That year, I finally moved out. I rented a modest 1-bedroom and bought a used Subaru. I paid off my student loans. My parents, still shocked, stopped asking if I was coming back to the hardware store. In 2023, we crossed $500,000 in annual revenue. I didn't take outside investment. No flashy pitch deck. Just a weird niche, obsessive customer service, and a lot of patience. I hired a COO, Josh, of course, and focused on growth. We started experimenting with AI tools for printer diagnostics, built a chatbot, and even launched a YouTube channel with tips, reviews, and fix walkthroughs. Looking back, the funny part is how accidental it all was. I didn't set out to be a founder or entrepreneur. I just hated feeling helpless. I wanted control over my time and my future. And it turns out, helping people unjam their printers was enough to build a life around. I still remember that first $25 Zoom call. The guy had a Canon inkjet that wouldn't connect to his Wi-Fi. He sounded stressed. He was trying to print a lease agreement. We fixed it in 8 minutes. He laughed and said, "You're like the printer whisperer." I guess I was. Now we serve clients in all 50 states, and I've spoken at 2 small business tech conferences. I tell the same story every time. I never wrote that screenplay, but I built something real, something useful. And sometimes, that's better than a Hollywood ending. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I started my company because of a chair, not a metaphorical one. A literal, creaky, stained, government-issued office chair with a permanent lean to the left. It was 2017, and I was a low-level analyst for a bloated government contractor that did compliance consulting for financial institutions. My job was basically glorified data entry with a touch of spreadsheet wizardry. I had a corner cubicle that faced a wall, and every morning I walked past rows of equally gray people in equally gray chairs under equally gray lights. The chair became symbolic, though I didn't realize it at the time. It leaned left, and so did my back. It gave me static shocks in winter. It squeaked when I shifted, and I shifted a lot because the job made my skin crawl. Every lunch break, I walked to a nearby park and scrolled through Reddit threads about startups, FU money, and the mythic escape from the 9-to-5 grind. But I had student loans, rent, a car note. Leaving felt irresponsible. Until one day, something snapped. I had spent weeks creating an internal dashboard to track auditing anomalies. A boring tool, but one that actually saved hours of manual work. I demoed it for my manager, who nodded, gave me a polite smile, and then presented it as his in the next meeting with the senior VP. I sat in that godforsaken chair, watching him get applauded for my work, and thought, this cannot be my life. That night, I stayed up past 3 a.m. building a prototype of a SaaS product I'd been toying with. It was a simple idea, a plug-and-play auditing tool for small financial firms that couldn't afford the overpriced consulting agencies. The irony was beautiful. I would automate the exact work my employer charged $250/HR for. I called it Clear Audit, bought a domain for $9, and began cold emailing. The first few months were brutal. I'd wake at 6, work until 8, then head to my day job, come home, eat whatever was in the fridge, and code until midnight. I had no social life, no balance. But every time I logged a new user or someone responded to an email with interest, it was like a jolt of dopamine through my spine. I got my first paying customer 3 months in, a regional credit union in Nebraska. $99/month. I remember doing the math. If I could get just 500 customers, I could quit. That became my goal. I launched on Product Hunt. Crickets. I paid a Reddit mod $50 to pin my story on a startup sub. That brought in 200 users overnight. Then came the lawyer letters. My former employer found out what I was doing. Maybe someone snitched. Maybe they saw me on Reddit and sent me a cease and desist. They claimed the idea was theirs, even though I'd built it on my own time, on my own laptop, with no code or data from their systems. I panicked. I thought I was done. But a friend of a friend who was a startup lawyer told me to breathe. I scrubbed my code, documented every step of my build process, and sent a carefully worded response. I heard nothing back, but I knew I had to move fast. I quit 2 weeks later. I had $8K in the bank and $2,000/month in expenses. My parents thought I was insane. My girlfriend, now wife, supported me, but said I had 6 months to show some kind of traction. So I did the most unscalable thing I could think of. I manually onboard every single customer. I had phone calls. I made walkthrough videos with personalized greetings. I rewrote documentation based on support emails. I embedded myself in forums and subreddits, answering questions without pitching until people started asking what tool I used. Month 6, I had 43 customers. Month 9, 137. By month 12, I hit break even. And then something strange happened. One of my users was a compliance officer at a fintech startup that had just closed a $20M Series A. He liked Clear Audit so much, he asked if we had an enterprise tier. I said, of course, then spent the weekend building it. That contract alone brought in $4,000/month. It broke my brain. I'd spent the first year fighting for $99 subscriptions, and now one client had quadrupled my revenue. I pivoted immediately, still kept the self-serve version, but doubled down on enterprise. By year 2, I hired 2 contractors, one for dev, one for support. I paid myself $60K, enough to live, and reinvested everything else. We hit $30K MRR, then $50K, then $100K. We're now in year 5. Clear Audit has 16 employees. We serve 800 plus small firms and 45 enterprise clients. We've been profitable since year 2, bootstrapped the whole way, and I've never taken a cent of VC. People ask me if I miss the stability of a day job, the benefits, the structure. I laugh. Then I swivel in my Herman Miller chair, which I bought on a whim the day I hit 100 customers, and remember the one that started it all. That crooked, government-issued torture device that pushed me to build something better. The chair made me an entrepreneur. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. My dad owned a pizza shop, and I watched that place nearly kill him. He worked 14-hour days, never took a vacation, and when he finally sold the business, he barely broke even. I went the safe route, college, marketing degree, cushy corporate job in a mid-tier tech company. It paid the bills. It also slowly drained the color from my life. Everything changed the day I got fired. Middle of Q3, our startup got acquired by a larger company that decided to streamline operations, which apparently meant axing the entire brand team. I was 29, single, recently dumped, and sitting in a bar at 2 p.m. trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. Then my friend Sam texted me, "Let's start that thing we talked about." We hadn't talked about anything in months, so I thought he sent it to the wrong person. But then it clicked. Back in college, we joked about building a site where people could share hyperlocal recommendations, like not just where to eat in a city, but which vendor to trust at a specific flea market or the best time to hit a neighborhood bakery before the sourdough sold out. Kind of like Yelp, but more intimate and curated. We called it Spots. Half drunk and jobless, I said, screw it, let's build Spots. Sam was a UX designer with a bit of savings. I had a severance package, time, and enough marketing experience to fake the rest. We started that night. The first 3 months were manic. We built a prototype using Webflow and Airtable, ran a pilot in our neighborhood in Brooklyn, and tried to get friends to post about their favorite under-the-radar places. Adoption was non-existent. People loved talking about food, but no one wanted to be the first to post. We offered $10 coffee cards for every review. Still crickets. Then came Karen. She was this ultra-passionate, extremely online 52-year-old who lived 5 blocks away. She found our project via a community Facebook group and DM'd me with a dozen local spots we should include. We asked if she wanted to post them herself. She said, with pleasure. Karen basically became our first influencer. She added something like 40 detailed posts in the first week, with photos, little anecdotes, even advice like, ask for the off-menu ginger scone. She had fans immediately. Other locals followed her and started posting their own finds. It was slow, but it was movement. We gamified it. Users earned badges for being the first to post about a spot, and you could earn trust points when others liked your write-ups. Karen was our first neighborhood hero. We made a digital badge and everything. It looked cheesy, but people wanted it. 6 months in, we had about 2,000 users in 3 neighborhoods. A mix of locals, foodies, antique collectors. Not big numbers, but the engagement was insane. People were writing Yelp-length reviews about corner bodegas. The problem? We were burning money like crazy. Server costs weren't the issue. It was user acquisition. We tried Instagram ads, Reddit posts, even flyers at farmers markets. For every $100 we spent, we'd get maybe 3 new active users. At that rate, we'd run out of money in a few months. Sam wanted to quit. I didn't. So I made a gamble. I borrowed $20,000 from a friend of my sister's who was a low-key angel investor. His only advice, don't use this to get more users. Use it to find why people really use your product. So I spent every day for 2 months interviewing our users. I emailed 300 of them. I showed up at the spots they wrote about. I even had coffee with Karen. What I found was this: Spots wasn't about businesses. It was about memory and identity. People weren't just recommending a taco truck. They were writing love letters to their cities, their routines, their relationships. We pivoted. Not a full rebrand, but a messaging overhaul. Spots became the map of your life. We encouraged storytelling. Users could now attach memory pins to places. First dates, childhood traditions, breakup walks. Our app became half journal, half guidebook. It exploded. One user wrote about the tree where he proposed to his girlfriend. Another posted about a record shop his dad used to take him to that no longer existed, but the pin remained. We weren't Yelp anymore. We were emotional cartography. Press started noticing. A lifestyle blog called us the most wholesome app of the year. NPR reached out for a segment. Our user base grew 10x in 4 months. We got an email from a VC firm in San Francisco. They said they'd been watching us. I was terrified. I'd never pitched before, never even built a deck. But I flew out, pitched to a room of 6 people in Patagonia vests, and somehow didn't puke. They gave us $600,000 in seed funding. We hired 2 engineers and a part-time community manager. Yes, Karen. We rebuilt the back end, added a native app, and expanded to 20 cities. It was fast, chaotic, and deeply unstable. Some cities flopped. Others, like Austin and Chicago, took off like rockets. At our peak, we had 300,000 active users. People were making pilgrimages to see each other's memory pins. One couple met through mutual comments and got married under a tree in Prospect Park. But nothing is permanent. A year after our seed round, a big social app released a feature nearly identical to ours. They had 50 million users and infinite budget. Within 6 months, our growth flatlined. Investors got anxious. We tried to niche down again, memory maps for couples, legacy pins for aging parents. Nothing stuck. Sam burned out and left. I offered to buy his shares for almost nothing. He agreed. I pivoted one last time. We turned Spots into a private journaling app with map integration. No followers, no badges. Just you, your places, your stories. Quiet, elegant, private. It worked. We went from 300,000 users to 40,000, but they were fiercely loyal. We introduced a $4.99 per month plan. About half converted. The app now makes around $1.2 million a year. Small team. No drama. We're profitable. Sometimes I miss the rush, the chaos of going viral. But mostly I just love waking up, logging into our admin panel, and seeing where people are dropping pins. Love stories in Kyoto. Sandwich memories in Cleveland. Someone in Argentina who's mapped their whole life through old bookstores. That's enough. I still visit the pizza shop my dad sold. The new owner kept the name. On the wall, there's a tiny framed photo of my dad and me when I was 6. I dropped a memory pin there last week. I built $1 million business by accident, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. This all started because I hated my job. Not the dramatic, I hate my boss kind of thing, just that slow soul-crushing realization that spreadsheets, Zoom calls, and status meetings were not what I wanted my life to be about. I was 28, working as a product manager for a decently known SaaS company, making okay money and living in a generic apartment in a generic suburb. My life was a copy of a copy. But I had this hobby, woodworking. My grandfather was a carpenter, and I learned how to use a lathe before I could ride a bike. It became my mental escape. Nights and weekends were spent in the small garage of my duplex, sanding, sawing, gluing. For years, I made custom furniture for friends and family. Nothing crazy, but I loved it. The accidental business started because of a door. My landlord refused to replace the busted sliding barn-style door in the kitchen, so I made one. From scratch. Just for myself. I posted a photo of it on Reddit r/DIY because I was proud of how clean the lines were. It was one of those posts you think maybe 5 people will like. But it blew up. People messaged me asking if I could make them one. At first, I said no. I didn't have time, I thought. Then someone offered to pay me $600 for one. I had made mine for around $120 in materials. That was persuasive. I made another, and then another. I set up an Instagram account with 0 expectations, posted a few build pics, and got some more DMs. I quit my job 6 months later. I know that sounds insane. It was. I didn't have a business plan. Just a few orders and the gut feeling that I couldn't waste any more time pretending to be someone else. I moved in with my brother to save on rent, bought better tools with my last paycheck, and started making custom doors full-time. The first year, I made $47,000. Not bad. Not great. But I was happier than I'd ever been. I named the business Knockwood and got serious about marketing. My girlfriend at the time, now wife, helped me set up a basic Shopify site. We bought a domain, paid someone on Fiverr to design a logo, and used every photo I had to build a half-decent gallery. What changed everything was TikTok. I didn't even have a TikTok account until mid-2021. I thought it was all dancing teenagers. But I posted a video of me carving a design into a live-edge slab with a caption like, POV, you make your own furniture because capitalism is broken, and it got 400K views. Then another one hit 1 million. Suddenly, I had a waitlist. Here's where the business stopped being a one-man hobby. I couldn't keep up with orders. I brought in a friend from my old job who was a killer with operations and spreadsheets. He streamlined the back end, set up automated invoicing, and helped me actually understand margins. I'd been winging it until then. I brought on 2 part-time assistants, then leased a small workshop space in the industrial part of town. We started offering customizable options, dimensions, with types, finishes. People loved it. We doubled down on what made us unique: sustainable sourcing, handmade quality, and no corporate BS. I documented the process online religiously. People loved seeing their piece get made. Year 2 revenue $289,000. We hit our first million in year 4. It wasn't just doors anymore. We expanded to dining tables, floating shelves, bed frames. Still custom, still handmade. But now I had a team of 6 craftsmen and 3 admin staff. We partnered with a local nonprofit to source reclaimed wood, which boosted our story and our SEO. Every product shipped with a handwritten card that said where the wood came from. This table was made from a maple tree felled in the 1998 ice storm in Quebec. Stuff like that made people feel something. But success isn't clean. Here's the part people don't talk about. There were weeks I didn't sleep. A storm took out the power to our workshop the night before a $12K order was due. A supplier ghosted us. A customer threatened to sue because a table cracked after 3 months. Turns out they used it as a patio table in January in Minnesota. I thought growth would make things easier. It didn't. It just made the stakes higher. I had to learn to lead, to delegate, to stop being the guy who did everything himself. That was the hardest part. I wasn't just a woodworker anymore. I was a business owner. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of being broke and covered in sawdust. Still, I don't regret it. We now gross over $2.3M annually. I take home about $180K a year and work about 40 hours a week. though I still sneak into the workshop most evenings just to keep my hands in the game. We've shipped to all 50 states. Our work has been featured in 2 magazines. And yeah, my mom cried when she saw my name in Better Homes and Gardens. What blows my mind the most is that it all started because my landlord wouldn't fix a door. So here's my advice, for what it's worth. If there's something you do that makes you forget what time it is, pay attention. If strangers start offering you money for it, pay closer attention. You don't have to know where it's going. Just start. Build one door. I always believed that success was just a matter of being in the right place at the right time. That was until I learned the hard way that it was more about perseverance, risk-taking, and, ultimately, believing in something no one else did. I grew up in a small town where people generally stayed put. Most of my classmates dreamed of working in the local factory or joining the army. I, however, had bigger ambitions. I didn't know what exactly success would look like for me, but I was determined to find out. From a young age, I was fascinated by business. I remember watching infomercials late at night and thinking, that's what I want to do. I didn't know anything about marketing or finance, but I loved the idea of building something from scratch. I just had no idea how to get there. After high school, I decided to attend a state university. It wasn't the most prestigious one, but it was affordable, and I had my eyes on learning something that would set me apart. I enrolled in business management, hoping to learn all the ins and outs of running a company. What I didn't realize was how little that would actually prepare me for the real world. The professors were great, but most of what they taught felt theoretical, not practical. I needed real-world experience. During my sophomore year, I got my first taste of the business world when I joined a startup that had just started gaining some traction. It was a social media app focused on helping people find like-minded communities, and at first, it seemed like the next big thing. The founders were passionate, and the product had potential. But after a few months, the company started to falter. It was a classic case of too many ideas and not enough focus. One day, the founders called a meeting and told us they were running out of money and couldn't continue. That was the moment that changed everything for me. I realized that I didn't want to work for someone else. I wanted to be the one making the decisions, taking the risks, and figuring out how to pivot when things got tough. I left the startup and decided to go all in on starting my own business. I had no money. I had no experience in starting a business. And I had no clue what I was doing. But I had one thing: determination. I spent the next 6 months working on an idea for an app that would help people find and book local services, from plumbers to dog walkers. I figured that there had to be a better way for people to connect with the right professionals without having to sift through endless reviews or deal with unreliable contractors. The first version of the app was garbage. It was slow, clunky, and the user interface looked like it had been designed by a 12-year-old. But I didn't care. I launched it anyway. It wasn't about perfection. It was about getting something out there and seeing if it would stick. At first, no one downloaded it. I spent hours sending out cold emails to local businesses, asking them to join the platform. I offered them free listings, convinced that once they saw the value, they'd come on board. It was a slow, painful process, but eventually, I started getting a few customers. Slowly, the business began to grow. I reinvested every dollar I made into improving the app, hiring better developers, and making sure that the user experience was as smooth as possible. But the real breakthrough didn't come until I took a risk that would change everything. A large tech company reached out to me with an offer to buy my company. The offer was generous, enough to let me live comfortably for the rest of my life. But there was a catch. They wanted to take control of everything. They'd shut down my team, change the direction of the product, and probably eliminate everything I had worked so hard to build. I almost took the offer. It was tempting, but something in me resisted. I wasn't ready to let go. I hadn't come this far just to sell out. So, I turned it down. And honestly, that decision almost broke me. Without the financial backing of a larger company, I was on my own again. I had to find a way to survive. That's when things got really interesting. I realized that if I wanted to grow, I needed to scale in a way that didn't require massive amounts of money up front. I started partnering with other small businesses, offering them a way to cross-promote on the platform. It was a low-risk, high-reward strategy, and it worked. My app began to gain traction among local businesses that were looking for cost-effective ways to attract new customers. The more I focused on building relationships, the more my app grew. There were plenty of setbacks along the way. I remember losing sleep over a server crash that wiped out a week's worth of data. There was a month when we almost ran out of cash, and I had to borrow money from a friend just to make payroll. But every time I thought about giving up, I reminded myself that failure wasn't an option. I was in this for the long haul, and I had to trust that all my hard work would eventually pay off. And it did. After 3 years of grinding, my app reached a tipping point. Word of mouth began spreading, and we started seeing thousands of new users every day. Local businesses were begging to be featured, and the once quiet app had turned into a platform that was starting to gain real momentum. Investors began taking notice, and soon, I was meeting with venture capitalists who were interested in funding the next stage of growth. The growth wasn't overnight, and it wasn't easy, but it was worth it. I learned that building a successful business takes far more than just a great idea. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to take risks. It takes a willingness to fail, learn from your mistakes, and keep moving forward. I'm proud to say that the app once launched from my dorm room is now used by millions of people across the country, helping small businesses connect with customers and grow. Today, I'm still running the business, though it's not just me anymore. I've built an amazing team of people who are as passionate as I am about what we're doing. And as much as I've learned from my own mistakes, I've learned even more from the people around me. I'm proud of what we've built, but I know this is just the beginning. So, if you're out there thinking about taking the leap, don't let fear hold you back. You'll stumble. You'll fail. But if you keep going, if you believe in yourself and your vision, you just might find success in the most unexpected places. The road isn't easy, but that's what makes it worthwhile. If you want to build something, anything, you've got to start. Even if the first version of your dream is garbage, just get it out there and figure it out along the way. That's how I did it, and that's how I know you can too. I've always had an entrepreneurial mindset. From a young age, I was the kid who set up lemonade stands, sold candy at school, and tried every possible hustle. I remember being a teenager and wanting to buy a new laptop, but having no idea where to get the money for it. That's when I discovered eBay. I started flipping things, mostly random items I found around the house on eBay. Old comic books and used electronics, even clothes that no longer fit. My parents thought it was cute, but didn't take it seriously. I didn't mind. I was making money, and I felt like I was on to something big. Fast forward a few years, and I'm fresh out of college with a marketing degree in hand and no real job prospects. I had a ton of student debt, a stack of bills piling up, and the nagging feeling that I had to do something on my own. I didn't want to work for anyone else. It wasn't that I was against the idea of working, just the idea of working for someone else's dream while mine collected dust. I decided to take a gamble and turn the side hustle I'd been running on eBay into something full-time. At the time, I was mainly flipping gadgets and electronics, sourcing them from thrift stores and garage sales, then reselling them online. I took out a small loan from my parents to buy my first real inventory, a batch of refurbished phones. My plan was simple: buy low, sell high, and use the profits to reinvest. There was no blueprint for success in my head, just sheer determination. Things didn't go as smoothly as I'd imagined. The phones I'd bought were cheaper than new models, but they were still expensive enough that if something went wrong, I'd be in trouble. Sure enough, one batch of phones came defective. I had to refund the customers, and those phones, which I couldn't return, were a total loss. I nearly went bankrupt right there, but I wasn't about to quit. I reached out to the customers and explained the situation, offering them discounts on future purchases or upgrades. In the end, I salvaged the relationship and got better at identifying which suppliers I could trust. The next step was learning about digital marketing. I took a few online courses, read blogs, and joined Facebook groups where entrepreneurs shared tips. I realized the power of social media, specifically Instagram, and how it could help build my brand. I started posting unboxing videos, reviews, and tutorials on how to fix common issues with electronics. Slowly but surely, people began to notice. My followers grew, and my sales began to climb. By year 2, I had a solid customer base. I expanded my offerings, adding accessories and tech gadgets that were trending. I kept reinvesting my profits into inventory, making sure to scale at a pace I could handle. But I made a huge mistake around the 3rd year. I got cocky. I started to think I had it all figured out. I expanded into a new category, smart home devices, and lost focus on my core business. The smart home market was flooded, and I didn't have the expertise to compete. I bought way too much inventory and was left with piles of products that nobody wanted. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars. That setback taught me an invaluable lesson. Diversification is important, but it's essential to stay grounded in what works. I sold off the smart home stock at a loss, cut my losses, and refocused on my niche, refurbished electronics. This time, I also sought advice from mentors, people who had been in the business for decades. They taught me about cash flow, proper inventory management, and how to use data to forecast demand. It was a tough pill to swallow, but it made me more disciplined. Things started to turn around. By year 4, I had saved enough to hire a small team. I hired a few people for customer service, inventory management, and social media content. My business was growing faster than I could have imagined. I spent more time working on my business rather than in it, which allowed me to focus on scaling. I started to optimize my website for better conversion rates, invest in paid ads, and outsource tasks that were holding me back. The real breakthrough came when I started selling my products through Amazon. I'd been hesitant about Amazon at first, thinking it would dilute my brand, but the platform opened up a whole new world. I used their fulfillment services, which saved me time on logistics, and I tapped into their massive customer base. Suddenly, my business was accessible to people across the country. Around that time, I had a major realization. My success wasn't just about selling products, it was about building trust. I wanted to create a brand that people would associate with reliability and quality. I decided to launch my own website, separate from Amazon, where I could control the customer experience. I invested in building a user-friendly site, complete with customer reviews and an easy return policy. That move paid off in ways I couldn't have predicted. My customer retention skyrocketed. 5 years into my journey, my business was doing well enough that I could consider expanding internationally. I began looking into logistics, shipping, and marketing to countries outside the US. It was an expensive and complicated process, but it paid off. By the time I reached year 6, my sales had grown by 300%. The international market was incredibly responsive to the products I sold, and the brand was starting to be recognized worldwide. Then came a series of events that felt like the universe was testing me. A massive competitor entered the market, undercutting my prices by 30%. They had more inventory, bigger warehouses, and millions in marketing spend. For a moment, I was paralyzed with fear. I had 2 choices. I could lower my prices and risk devaluing my brand, or I could double down on my strengths. I chose the latter. I focused on customer service, offering free shipping, personalized support, and a satisfaction guarantee. My loyal customers appreciated that I wasn't just about profits, I genuinely cared about their experience. It wasn't an overnight success, but over time, my business rebounded. The competitor fizzled out as their business model was unsustainable, relying on cutting prices rather than building a loyal customer base. By contrast, I had spent years cultivating trust and value. That decision to not compromise on my principles proved to be the right one. Today, my business is thriving. We've expanded to a team of over 50 employees, we're selling across multiple continents, and we're diversifying into new categories. But I'll never forget those tough early days when it felt like I was on the brink of failure. Entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's a grind. There are ups and downs, and the setbacks often feel overwhelming. But it's in those moments of adversity that you truly learn who you are as an entrepreneur. The key is not giving up, not when things get tough, and not when the road seems endless. I'm not a millionaire yet, but I've built something I'm incredibly proud of. And honestly, that's enough for me. To anyone out there thinking about taking the leap, do it. But be prepared to work hard, learn from your mistakes, and keep pushing forward. Because the only way out is through. I've always had an entrepreneurial itch, even when I didn't fully understand what that meant. Growing up in a small town, the options were limited for someone who didn't want to work in a factory or at a grocery store. But my mind was always spinning, thinking of ways to make money beyond the typical routes. When I was 19, I decided I was going to start my own business. I didn't have much, just a few $100 saved up from odd jobs and a big dream. I wanted to open a local coffee shop. Seems like a simple enough idea, right? But I didn't have experience in business, and I certainly didn't know how to run a cafe. What I did have was an obsession with the idea of a community space, somewhere people could relax, read, meet, or just enjoy a good cup of coffee. I figured that passion could get me through the tough stuff. I started by scouting locations, trying to find the perfect spot. After weeks of walking up and down the main street, I found a tiny, rundown space that had been vacant for years. It was a gym if you could see through the dust and dilapidation. The rent was cheap, and I knew I could make it work with a bit of elbow grease. The problem was, I didn't have nearly enough money to cover the renovation costs and equipment I needed to open. At first, I tried to get a loan from the bank. I walked in with my pitch, plans, projections, and a dream. I thought for sure they'd see my potential and hand over the cash. Instead, I got a polite no. The reason? I had no business history. I had no credit, no collateral. I wasn't a safe bet, but I wasn't ready to give up. I knew I had to get creative. I started reaching out to friends and family, telling them about my vision. At first, it was met with a lot of skepticism. My parents were particularly concerned. "You want to throw your money into a coffee shop?" they asked. "How will you make money? Do you even know how to make coffee?" I didn't, but I promised to figure it out. After some persistence, I managed to convince my parents to lend me some money, and a few friends chipped in as well. Still, the amount wasn't enough. I had to get scrappy. I sold my car. I sold anything I could find that wasn't nailed down. I even sold some old musical instruments I didn't use anymore. Every penny counted. Then came the next challenge, finding suppliers. I had no idea where to start. I knew coffee beans were a big deal, but how was I supposed to know which supplier was reliable or even good quality? I spent hours online, reading reviews, and reaching out to small roasters to learn more. After many calls and emails, I found a small local roaster who was willing to work with me. That was a huge breakthrough. It wasn't the cheapest option, but it felt right. Plus, I wanted to support local businesses, so it was a win-win. The renovations were grueling. I didn't have the money to hire contractors, so I did as much as I could myself. I watched YouTube tutorials on everything from tiling to plumbing. I painted the walls a soft cream color, installed old wooden furniture that I found at second-hand stores, and set up a small counter with a beautiful espresso machine I saved for. It wasn't perfect, but it had charm, and that's what I was going for. Finally, after 6 months of blood, sweat, and tears, the coffee shop was ready to open. I remember the night before the grand opening, I stayed up late, wondering if anyone would even show up. What if the coffee was bad? What if the whole idea flopped? I had poured my entire soul into this, and I was terrified that it would all crumble. But the next morning, people started trickling in. The shop wasn't busy at first, but it was steady. I took orders, made drinks, and chatted with customers. I didn't know it at the time, but building those relationships was key. People wanted to support something authentic, something that felt real. And I was real. I worked the shop myself every day, learning as I went. Months passed, and the business grew. Slowly, but surely, the word spread. People liked the vibe of the shop, the cozy space, the warm drinks, the sense of community. My regulars started showing up every morning, and I started getting a lot of repeat business. I began to develop a menu that reflected the taste of the neighborhood, offering different blends, seasonal drinks, and even small baked goods that I baked in the back. I was learning the ropes, growing both personally and professionally. But just when things started to look good, the economy took a downturn. People were spending less, and I had to tighten my budget. I started looking for ways to expand without draining the business too much. That's when I got the idea to host events. I had a space that was perfect for small gatherings, and I knew people loved live music, book clubs, and even knitting circles. I reached out to local artists and writers, offering them a place to showcase their work in exchange for drawing a crowd. The events started to build momentum, and before long, I was attracting more customers on slow nights. It was also around this time that I started focusing more on social media. I didn't know the first thing about Instagram or Facebook marketing, but I knew I had to learn fast. I started posting daily pictures of our drinks, sneak peeks of new menu items, and behind-the-scenes moments. I also ran contests and giveaways to get people talking. It worked. Slowly but surely, the shop started gaining more traction online. I didn't have a huge following, but my community was loyal, and that was what mattered. The real turning point came when I decided to offer a subscription service. People could pay a monthly fee for a set number of drinks each month, and they also got a discount on pastries. It was a gamble, but it paid off. Subscriptions brought in consistent revenue, and it created a sense of exclusivity for customers. They loved the idea of being part of something special. 5 years later, my coffee shop is thriving. I've expanded to a second location in a nearby city, and I've even started selling my own branded coffee beans. The shop has become a hub in the community, a place where people can connect, relax, and recharge. But looking back, I realize it wasn't just about the coffee. It was about building relationships, creating a brand people believed in, and being willing to adapt when things got tough. I'm still learning every day, still facing new challenges, but I know one thing for sure. There's nothing more satisfying than watching something you built from the ground up come to life. I was 23 when I started my first business. Fresh out of college with a degree in marketing, I thought I had everything figured out. I had the perfect idea for a product, a custom apparel brand that could be personalized by the customer. It was simple, unique, and could cater to any audience. At least, that's what I thought. I had worked part-time jobs throughout college, saving up about $5,000, which I thought would be more than enough to kick things off. I rented a small workspace in a shared office building and started working on designs, sourcing fabric, and finding a manufacturer. The first few months were slow. I was doing everything by myself, creating the website, writing all the marketing content, and even handling customer service. The long hours and sleepless nights began to take a toll on me. I was overwhelmed but kept pushing forward, convinced that success was just around the corner. In the beginning, I made some rookie mistakes. For example, I underestimated the importance of customer service. I thought that if I just provided a good product, the customers would come. Boy, was I wrong. My website wasn't user-friendly, and I didn't offer any real support for people who had issues with their orders. The return process was convoluted, and people were frustrated with delays. I barely managed to keep the business afloat in those first 6 months. But I didn't give up. I knew I had to improve, so I hired a freelance web developer to fix the website and create a better user experience. I also reached out to a few people I trusted and asked for advice on customer service. One of the most valuable lessons I learned was that the customer experience is just as important as the product itself. I took their feedback seriously and started offering live chat support and a simple, no questions asked return policy. It made a massive difference. By the time the second year came around, the business was starting to grow, but not at the pace I had hoped for. I was still living on a shoestring budget, and the competition in the custom apparel industry was fierce. I had started advertising on social media, but my ads weren't converting as well as I had expected. It was a punch to the gut. I began questioning if I was cut out for this and whether I should just throw in the towel. But something inside me kept saying, "You've come this far. You can't quit now." So I decided to make a bold move. I reinvested almost all the money I had left into a professional marketing campaign. I hired an influencer with a decent following to promote my product. It wasn't cheap, but I figured if it didn't work, I'd have no choice but to close the doors. This was my last shot. The influencer campaign went viral. Sales skyrocketed in a matter of days. My Instagram followers grew by the thousands, and I couldn't keep up with the orders. It was both thrilling and terrifying at the same time. But this was my big break. I quickly hired a few more people to help with customer service, inventory management, and fulfillment. The next few months were a whirlwind. I remember feeling like I was on top of the world, thinking I had finally made it. But here's the thing about entrepreneurship. The highs are always followed by lows. And just as quickly as my sales had skyrocketed, they started to dip. The market was saturated, new trends emerged, and customer interest faded. The next year was a blur of anxiety and frustration. I had to pivot once again. I realized that to stand out in such a competitive market, I needed a niche. Custom apparel was too broad. It was great for quick sales, but it wasn't sustainable. That's when I decided to focus on sustainable fashion, using eco-friendly materials and ethical manufacturing processes. It was a risk, but I felt strongly about the direction I wanted to take. I revamped my brand, rebranded the company as environmentally conscious, and started working with eco-friendly suppliers. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Consumers, especially millennials and Gen Z, were increasingly drawn to businesses that prioritized sustainability. I invested in creating a transparent supply chain and even partnered with several environmental organizations to support green initiatives. It wasn't an overnight success, but slowly, my brand started gaining traction again. The next few years were some of the hardest, but also the most rewarding. I didn't make much profit at first, but I had built a loyal community of customers who shared my values. I kept pushing forward, improving the product, and refining my marketing strategies. We started getting features in media outlets, which helped boost credibility. By the time I turned 30, my company was finally profitable. It wasn't a huge leap, but we were stable, and that felt like a huge win. I had grown so much, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person. I had learned how to navigate failure, how to adapt, and how to embrace the unknown. I still remember those sleepless nights, wondering if I had made the right decision, but I don't regret any of it. Looking back, it was the challenges that made the journey worthwhile. I didn't have a mentor or a ton of capital, but I had determination and a willingness to learn. I made mistakes, but I learned from them. The experience shaped me into the entrepreneur I am today. It taught me that the road to success is never a straight line. It's filled with setbacks, mistakes, and moments of doubt. But if you're willing to keep going, you just might make it. As of today, my business has expanded into a full clothing line, and we've even launched a separate eco-conscious accessories brand. We've been able to create jobs for several employees, and we continue to advocate for sustainability in the fashion industry. What started as a small, struggling idea has turned into something much bigger than I ever imagined. It's been a long journey, and I'm still learning and growing, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I've built a business I'm proud of, and more importantly, I've learned the most valuable lesson of all: never give up. The struggle is part of the process, and the payoff is worth it in the end. I never expected my life to change the way it did. One day, I was just another guy, grinding away at a 9-to-5 job, feeling stuck. The next thing I knew, I was running $1 million business. But let me backtrack a bit and tell you the whole story. It all started about 5 years ago. I was working as a marketing assistant for a mid-sized company. It was a decent job, but the kind of work where you know you're not going anywhere. I had dreams, big ones, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was wasting time. After all, I'd gone to school, gotten a degree, and started in a career that was supposed to lead somewhere. But there was something missing. It was around that time that I started looking into side hustles. I figured, why not try to build something on the side? If I failed, no harm done. If I succeeded, maybe I could finally break free from the chains of corporate life. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted something online. The flexibility, the scalability, it all appealed to me. After weeks of random searches and trying to figure out what was out there, I stumbled upon dropshipping. You've probably heard of it. It's the idea of setting up an online store and selling products without ever physically handling inventory. You only buy from suppliers when customers order, so it seemed like the perfect business model for someone who didn't have a ton of money to invest up front. I got obsessed. I spent every free moment I had reading about dropshipping, learning about the best niches, and how to market products. I was so hooked that I even started dreaming about it. One night, I decided I had to go for it. I'd saved up a little money, but I wasn't in the kind of financial position where I could risk everything. Still, I figured, what was the worst that could happen? I could always go back to my job if it didn't work out. So, I set up my first store, nothing fancy, just a basic Shopify site. I picked a niche I thought had potential pet products. I was careful, though. I didn't want to sell anything too mainstream like dog food or leashes. I researched and found a unique pet product, a smart collar that tracked pets' health. It was high-tech, different, and I thought it might catch the attention of pet owners who were willing to spend a little more for the sake of their animals. I built the website, set up a few ads, and waited. And waited. Days went by. Nothing. Crickets. It was discouraging, but I wasn't ready to quit yet. I'd invested some money into ads, and while I wasn't getting sales, I was getting a lot of clicks. So, I tweaked my approach. I focused more on my ads, refined my messaging, and updated my store. Slowly, I began to see a trickle of sales. Then it was a flood. It wasn't immediate, but eventually, everything started clicking. I reinvested every penny I made into advertising, optimizing my website, and finding better suppliers. After a few months, I had a steady stream of sales coming in, but I was still working my day job. That was the hardest part, managing my time between the two. I'd spend my days at the office and then stay up late answering customer inquiries, tweaking my store, and running ads. But soon enough, I hit a turning point. The income from my side business started matching, then surpassing, my day job salary. I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and fear. I was finally doing what I'd always dreamed of, but I knew it was time to make a big decision. Do I quit my job and go full-time with this business, or do I keep playing it safe? I didn't have an answer right away. It was one of those decisions that keeps you awake at night. I was scared, but I knew I couldn't keep juggling both for long. One day, I just made the leap. I handed in my resignation letter. My boss was supportive, even though I knew they were a bit surprised. That was when the real work started. Without the distractions of a 9-to-5 job, I was able to devote myself entirely to the business. I focused on scaling. I tested new products, launched new ad campaigns, and fine-tuned my website. I also started building a brand, which is what set me apart from other dropshipping businesses. What really accelerated my growth, though, was a viral marketing campaign. I had always believed that word of mouth could be a powerful marketing tool, but I never imagined it would take off the way it did. One of my satisfied customers posted a glowing review of my product on social media, and their post went viral. I couldn't believe it. Suddenly, my little store was inundated with orders. It was like a dream. I didn't waste the opportunity. I leveraged that viral post to run a limited-time promotion. I also offered discounts for customers who referred their friends. That's when things really snowballed. More people started talking about the brand, and sales went through the roof. From there, the business just exploded. I started hiring help to manage customer service, handle fulfillment, and assist with marketing. The team grew, and I got better at delegating. My life started to feel like it was finally coming together. Fast forward a couple of years, and my dropshipping business isn't just surviving, it's thriving. I've diversified into other niches, launched new products, and expanded my team. We now have hundreds of products in multiple categories. I've also invested in other online businesses, and I've even started mentoring others who want to follow the same path I did. But the road wasn't easy. There were countless nights of frustration, failed experiments, and moments when I thought about giving up. However, the key was persistence. Every time I hit a setback, I tried something new. I learned from my mistakes. And, most importantly, I never lost sight of my goal. It's been a roller coaster ride, but I wouldn't change a thing. I've been able to live the life I once dreamed of. I've got the financial freedom I always wanted, and I'm doing something I love. If there's one thing I'd tell someone thinking of starting their own business, it's this: don't be afraid to fail. The most successful people are the ones who keep pushing through, even when it feels impossible. Take the leap, and don't let fear hold you back. You'll surprise yourself with what you can achieve. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.